but it's fine. Just let's brush our teeth, pee, put some shoes on, and leave because my driver's in my...
When I won, the winged victory came to the Louvre in pieces, shattered, incomplete, and imperfect. Yet people still line up to see her. They admire her despite, or perhaps because of, her cracks. And that's all I can hope for. That despite my flaws, my mistakes, my broken edges, and there are many, people will still show up for me. At every premiere, at every performance, at every moment I stand before them, I hope they can still see something worth appreciating. And if they can't, if they disagree with that sentiment, then, as I said, just hit the unfollow button. I don't need your approval. I don't need your business. That single quote might have passed unnoticed on another day, but not this time. Because Rachel Zegler was already at the center of a media firestorm. Then, the internet exploded again, this time over something stranger, darker, and far more invasive. News broke that an OnlyFans account pretending to be Rachel had gone viral, rapidly gaining over 5,000 subscribers almost overnight. But the disturbing twist? The content wasn't real. It was entirely AI-generated, eerily realistic images that blurred the line between fantasy and identity theft. The videos and photos were sophisticated enough to fool thousands, sparking outrage and confusion before it was confirmed that Rachel had nothing to do with it. But even with the truth revealed, the damage was done. The scandal hit at the worst possible time. Rachel was already facing widespread criticism following her Snow White press tour, an exhausting stretch of viral interviews, awkward sound bites, and relentless memes. The film itself, once expected to be a triumphant reimagining of a Disney classic, had stumbled at the box office, with many blaming her attitude for turning audiences away. So when this digital controversy surfaced, it only fueled the narrative that Rachel Zegler's career was unraveling before the public's eyes. To many online, she had gone from a bright, promising star to a cautionary tale. Who's shocked that Snow White flopped? One viral post read, "You cast one of the least genuine, most out-of-touch people in Hollywood, and somehow the villain came out looking better." The villain, of course, was Gal Gadot, whose professionalism during the press tour only made Rachel's offbeat interviews seem worse by comparison. The backlash wasn't just about her personality, it stemmed from her own words. Rachel's comments about the 1937 original Snow White were what truly lit the fuse. In one now infamous interview, she dismissed the beloved film as weird and outdated, criticizing it for its focus on romance. "The original came out in 1937, she said, laughing, "and there's this guy who literally stalks her." Yeah, weird. Her tone, flippant and amused, didn't sit well with Disney's loyal fanbase. What she saw as witty self-awareness, millions saw as arrogance and disrespect. The more she spoke, the deeper the hole seemed to get. Rachel went on to emphasize that her version of Snow White would be a complete reinvention. Feminist, independent, and stripped of the traditional love story. "She's not going to be saved by the prince," she declared. "She's not dreaming of true love, she's dreaming of becoming a leader." It might have been empowering in theory, but paired with her earlier mockery, it came off as self-righteous. She wasn't presenting an evolution of a story, she was dismissing it. Her comments didn't stop there. She joked that her co-star Andrew Burnap's scenes could all be cut, and demanded that she should be paid for every hour the movie is streamed because she stood there for 18 hours in a dress. What was meant to sound confident and modern ended up sounding entitled and tone-deaf. To fans who grew up loving the innocence of Snow White, this wasn't progress. It was condescension. Online critics began dissecting every statement she made. Commentators accused her of being performatively woke, someone who mistook cynicism for empowerment. One viral rant claimed, "Rachel Zegler is extraordinarily woke, but she's woke in a way that's deranged. She thinks she's fighting the patriarchy, but she's just not stable." Like so many in Hollywood. The backlash spread far beyond film fans. Conservative pundits and casual internet users alike began using Rachel as an example of what they saw as the downfall of modern Hollywood, arrogance disguised as activism. The effect was devastating. What had once been a career on the rise was now defined by controversy. Studio insiders began leaking reports suggesting that Disney was in meltdown mode over the Snow White situation. Behind the scenes, executives reportedly feared the damage to the brand was irreversible. Projects that once had Rachel's name attached were quietly delayed or shelved altogether. There was a growing sense that the narrative had slipped out of her control, Every time she tried to defend herself, her words were clipped, remixed, and spread across social media, often stripped of nuance and context. Even sympathetic fans struggled to defend her. She had become a symbol, not of empowerment or artistry, but of how fast Hollywood's golden image can crack under the relentless glare of the internet. And so, when she said she hoped people would line up to see her despite her cracks, it wasn't just a poetic metaphor anymore, it was a plea. A reminder that behind the backlash and the headlines was still a young actress trying to hold together the fragments of a career that, just a few years ago, seemed destined for greatness. But in an era where public opinion shifts in seconds and empathy is in short supply, even a small crack can feel like a fatal fracture. When Snow White was first announced, the studio did everything it could to polish Rachel Zegler's public image. Her initial tweet about the project was carefully orchestrated, a bright, upbeat message celebrating her excitement for the role. Yay! Snow White! I can't wait! So excited to play her! It went viral instantly, racking up millions of views and giving Disney's PR team exactly what they wanted. For a brief moment, it looked like Rachel was finally getting back on track. But minutes later, she followed that tweet with another. And never forget, Free Palestine. It wasn't the sentiment itself that alarmed Disney, it was the timing. Within hours, the studio scrambled. They reportedly flew out one of the producers to meet with Rachel personally, asking her to take the post down. They explained that while she was entitled to her political beliefs, this was not the time or place to share them, especially when trying to build anticipation for a major family-oriented film. Maybe save it for your friends or your diary, one executive allegedly suggested, but Rachel refused. She wouldn't delete the tweet. That single act of defiance set off alarm bells inside the company. Disney eventually hired a social media consultant whose entire job was to monitor her online behavior, to follow her from appearance to appearance, ensuring she didn't post anything else that might alienate audiences. It was a drastic move, but executives were already uneasy. Rachel had earned a reputation for saying the quiet part out loud, about Snow White, about the industry, and even about her co-stars. Her comments on everything from Snow White and the Prince to traditional storylines about love and marriage, to Steven Spielberg, the producer of her breakout film West Side Story, all painted a picture of an actress seemingly detached from the legacy of those who came before her. She even once claimed that people questioned whether she was really Latina during her first movie, which further stirred debate online. Rachel's approach was often described as smug, detached, even disdainful, and in the digital age, the internet never forgets. Every old clip, every soundbite, every sarcastic remark resurfaced as Snow White's box office numbers began to sink. People began posting her old interviews like receipts, reminders of what they saw as arrogance and hypocrisy. Right-wing commentators mocked her relentlessly, calling her bitter and insufferable. "You don't even like your own character," one viral post said. "She just sounds angry at everything." But even neutral fans admitted she came across as condescending. It wasn't just what she said, it was how she said it. Her tone, her body language, her smirks, every laugh that sounded dismissive, every joke that landed like a jab. Instead of inspiring young women or representing a modern twist on a classic tale, she seemed to be mocking the very audience she needed to win over. What should have been confidence looked like contempt. What should have been passion felt like performance. Rachel often claimed she didn't care what critics thought, that she wasn't afraid to speak her mind. But the line between authenticity and arrogance is razor thin, and to many viewers, she had crossed it. Her interviews were filled with political tangents, disdain for traditional storytelling, and a kind of self-serious humor that alienated even sympathetic fans. "I never wanted to come off as me being ungrateful," she said once. "I can be having the greatest time of my life and still wish people would stop sending me death threats." And while that statement revealed something genuine, the exhaustion of being under constant scrutiny, it came too late. The damage had already been done. To be clear, Rachel wasn't the first actor to challenge Hollywood norms or speak boldly about feminist ideas. But her delivery lacked nuance. Rather than honoring the emotional bond fans had with Snow White, she seemed to mock it. Instead of presenting herself as the next generation's Disney princess, she appeared to be burning the blueprint entirely and offering nothing solid to replace it. Her rhetoric didn't inspire, it undermined. Rhetoric didn't inspire, it undermined.
What's really interesting is that Zegler's fall from grace has been a very satisfying watch for plenty of people.
And instead of being celebrated as a trailblazer, she became a target. The viral OnlyFans impersonation, though entirely fake, became symbolic. It was a grotesque mirror of her public downfall, artificial, distorted, and out of her control. The public had stopped buying what she was selling. As Rachel tried to piece her image back together, the internet simply moved on. In an industry where perception is everything, she was learning a painful truth. Being the main character doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes it comes with silence. Or worse, laughter. Meanwhile, her Snow White co-star Gal Gadot seemed to sense the danger early on. The two shared top billing, but as the press tour rolled forward, the tension between them became impossible to ignore. At first, it was subtle. Fewer joint interviews, awkward body language. Then came the Oscars. When Rachel and Gal took the stage together to present an award, the energy was undeniably stiff. The smiles were polite but empty. The distance between them, literal and emotional, was impossible to miss. Gal posed for solo photos. She avoided direct eye contact during interviews. And whenever possible, she skipped shared appearances altogether. Insiders close to the Wonder Woman star later revealed that Gal was quietly distancing herself from Rachel, doing everything she could to stay out of the controversy. It wasn't an open feud, but in Hollywood, silence often says more than any statement could. The final blow came when Snow White opened to a weak $45 million domestically, an embarrassing figure for a film with such a massive budget and legacy. Industry analysts quickly labeled it a flop. The contrast was striking. Where The Little Mermaid had sparked curiosity and conversation, Snow White had become a cultural cautionary tale. Rachel Zegler's story was supposed to be about triumph. A young actress rewriting Disney history, breaking boundaries, and bringing new life to an old classic. But instead, it became something else entirely. A story of how quickly adoration can turn to backlash, and how, in the digital age, a few misplaced words can dismantle an empire of dreams. The Little Mermaid's relative success only made Snow White's failure more glaring. Despite facing its own backlash before release, The Little Mermaid managed to pull in $95 million in its opening weekend. Snow White, by contrast, didn't just underperform, it collapsed. Box office trackers and fan forums lit up as viewers documented the film's disappointing numbers in real time. The movie's abysmal 1.6 rating on IMDb became a running joke across social media, reinforcing what audiences were already saying: no one was buying it. Critics didn't hold back either. Reviews called the film joyless, unfocused, and tone-deaf, a confused reinvention of a story that never needed fixing. And for many, the blame didn't fall on the studio or the director. It fell directly on Rachel Zegler's shoulders. Taking on Snow White wasn't just another role, it was stepping into one of Disney's most sacred legacies, a crown worn by generations of childhood imagination. Disney princesses aren't merely characters. They're symbols of innocence, wonder, and nostalgia. But Rachel's interpretation, and the film's approach overall, felt like a rejection of everything that made the original endure. The modern twist stripped away the romance, rewrote core plot elements, and even removed the iconic Seven Dwarfs. Parents who had grown up with the 1937 film found themselves wondering how to explain these sweeping changes to their kids. To them, this wasn't evolution, it was erasure. What had once been a timeless fairy tale now felt like a social statement disguised as entertainment. And Rachel's earlier interviews, where she laughed off the original story as weird and outdated, only confirmed that suspicion. Across YouTube comments, Reddit threads, and parenting forums, the backlash was consistent. "This isn't the Snow White we wanted," became the common refrain. Many families said they refused to take their children, afraid the movie would feel more like a lecture than a fantasy. Others admitted they had planned to see it, until they watched Rachel's interviews. It wasn't just the movie they distrusted, it was the person promoting it. Rachel had positioned herself as the voice of a new generation. Bold, outspoken, and unfiltered. But in doing so, she had alienated the very audience Disney depends on most: families. Parents who once saw her as a rising star now viewed her as someone who didn't respect the material or the people who loved it. And that sentiment has proven far more damaging than any bad review. The ripple effects are already showing. Industry insiders report that several projects Rachel was attached to are now being reassessed. Some producers are hesitant to move forward, concerned about the divisiveness of her public image. Others quietly admit they're not sure she's a reliable box office draw anymore. In Hollywood, reputation is currency. And right now, Rachel's name carries the wrong kind of buzz. It's a stunning reversal from where she was just a short time ago. After West Side Story, she was heralded as the next breakout talent, a prodigy with an Oscar-caliber voice and limitless potential. Steven Spielberg called her discovery a once-in-a-generation moment. But less than 2 years later, that narrative has crumbled. The girl once positioned as Disney's future now finds herself fighting for professional survival. Of course, every actor experiences setbacks, and one flop doesn't end a career. But Rachel's case is different, because the wounds seem largely self-inflicted. The box office numbers may have been bad, but it's her interviews, her tone, her perceived arrogance, and her dismissal of what audiences cherished that truly deepened the backlash. Viewers aren't just indifferent to her projects now, many are actively rooting against them. That kind of public sentiment isn't just a stumble, it's a rupture in trust. And in an industry where perception shapes reality, a perception problem can be fatal. With no high-profile defenders, no clear plan for reinvention, and the sting of a Disney disaster still fresh, Rachel's once bright career stands on a precarious edge. She was supposed to be the future of modern musical cinema, the fresh, fearless face of a new Disney era. Instead, she's become a symbol of how fast Hollywood can turn its back. Now, her name trends not for her talent, but for controversy, viral clips, mocking memes, deepfakes, and awkward red carpet moments. Hollywood loves a comeback story. But for Rachel Zegler, the question isn't whether she'll rise again. It's whether the audience she once had will ever want to watch her do it.